nation's deputy chief calls for more actions to protect Yemenis. Local and international groups demand investigating deaths of 20 child cancer patients in Sana'a. On World Poverty Day, Yemenis continue to suffer across the country. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shaza Abdelbain. The UN's Deputy Chief Joyce Msuwa called on the international community to take more actions to protect Yemenis. Her statement came after spending a week in Yemen, where she saw the humanitarian needs of war-affected Yemenis. This report has more details.
Following a 9-day visit to Yemen, Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator Joyce Msuwa emphasized the importance of increasing life-saving humanitarian assistance and protection in Yemen to safeguard the lives of millions of vulnerable people, the majority of whom are women and children. Yemen needs humanitarian relief for 23.4 million people, or more than two-thirds of the total population, with 17 million people facing food insecurity. Following over 7 years of fighting, a UN-sponsored truce in April reduced civilian casualties and allowed much-needed fuel supplies to enter the nation. The UN has advocated for the restoration and expansion of the truce, which expired on the 2nd of October this month.
We know the havoc that this conflict has wreaked on civilians in Yemen. I have seen it clearly during this trip. For their sake, I urge the parties to avoid any escalation in violence and to engage with a special envoy to agree on an extended and expanded truce.
She spoke to displaced women and girls who told her about gender-based violence, early marriage, and the lack of privacy and safety. They also spoke of the economic difficulties of living in displacement camps, among other safety concerns. Since the crisis in Yemen erupted in 2015, 4.3 million people have been displaced. Most people who have escaped violence have been displaced for many years, and many have had to relocate several times. An additional 160,000 people have been displaced by severe rains and flooding across the country since April. Ms. Msuwa encountered children and people who had been hurt by mines and explosive ordnances while she was in Hodeidah. Landmines and other explosives have surpassed all the other causes of civilian casualties in conflicts during the previous 6 months.
While the conflict has not resurged, civilians still face terrible dangers. Landmines and other explosive hazards have continued to be the main cause of civilian casualties. In September, 70 civilians were reportedly killed or injured last month by landmines, improvised explosive devices, and unexploded ordnance.
Building a lasting and inclusive peace and reviving the economy, according to Ms. Msuwa, are the two greatest strategies to lessen humanitarian suffering in Yemen. Otherwise, the roots of all humanitarian catastrophe would remain, inflicting further misery on all.
Was killed Sunday evening by a gunman inside his home in Sana'a. In addition, sources said that a gunman arrived at the house of the former Yemeni ambassador to Yemen and Ethiopia and fired more than 20 shots at him and a number of people in his house. Nauman held many high positions in Yemen, the last of which was the position of ambassador of Yemen in Ethiopia. A civilian was injured by a Houthi sniper in Taiz, southwest of Yemen. According to the sources, the injured person sustained a severe injury to his shoulder and then he was taken to a hospital in the city for treatment. Reduced fighting and de-escalation have not helped to ease the humanitarian suffering in Yemen, according to some political observers. This report has more details.
According to a statement made by Euromed Monitor in connection with World Food Day, a recent decrease in the level of violence in Yemen, a nation that has been mired in a violent armed war for more than 7 years, does not indicate a decrease in the severity of the humanitarian situation there. As a result of the conflict, Yemen's people continue to struggle more than ever to get basic sustenance. Over 61% of Yemen's population, or 19 million people, suffer from food insecurity. The bulk of Yemen's population, 20.7 million people, or nearly 66% of the overall population, needs humanitarian aid, according to data from the World Food Programme. More than 1.3 million pregnant or nursing mothers and 2.2 million children under the age of 5 require acute malnutrition treatment. Yemen, a country that imports around 95% of its needs, was especially affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine, which have caused a significant rise in the prices of essential goods and gasoline. Since the start of the war, food costs have increased by more than 150%. Furthermore, the development of the war in Ukraine is expected to lead to irregular wheat supplies in Yemen, since the country imports nearly 45% of its wheat from Ukraine and Russia, and its stockpile is only sufficient for a few months. There is an urgent need to direct humanitarian funds to Yemen, and parallel aid initiatives taken in Ukraine should not jeopardize donor nations' promises to alleviate Yemen's humanitarian situation. Last month, Euromed Monitor called on European member states to stop exporting arms to conflict parties in Yemen and to abstain from contributing to the war's continuation. The humanitarian crisis in Yemen can only be resolved if all parties to the war agree to put a stop to all of its manifestations and deal with its underlying causes in a way that promotes political stability, economic progress, and eventually better living circumstances for the population.
Along Yemen's coastline, UNDP's support to replace equipment and provide financial grants enables the re-establishment of a centuries-old industry, fisheries. Once Yemen's second most valuable export after oil and gas, the blue economy has the potential to help rejuvenate the economy and provide a valuable food source to millions of food-insecure Yemenis.
قبل ما نستلم الماكينة كان الوضع يعلم بهالله، بس كان الوضع متعب، ماكينة تعبانة، نسرح ونضوي، شغلك محصور. والآن الحمد لله بعد ما استلمت الماكينة ده العمل ريض، وانا بت بعيد وقريب، وانا مبسوط اللي يطمن من المحرك اللي معي، انا اعطينا الامان كامل.
UNDP helps fisherfolk reduce operational costs, limit fuel consumption, and increase daily catch. As the changing climate and marine ecosystems demand more flexibility, modern equipment and new skills help fisherfolk to navigate unpredictable weather safely and limit their impact on an already fragile sea environment.
Informed sources revealed that some Houthi leaders are involved in looting medical tools and devices in Sana'a. The sources indicated that the shipment of medical equipment was provided as a grant to government hospitals, then disappeared after being placed in the warehouses. The Yemeni Network for Rights accused the Houthi militia of trying to cover up the crime of 20 child cancer patients who died after being injected with expired chemo drug in Sana'a. This report has more details.
The Euro-Mediterranean Rights Monitor said in a statement that the World Health Organization must launch an urgent investigation into the death of at least 20 children at a hospital in Sana'a who were given what appears to be an expired drug. The Euromed Monitor expressed grave concern that more doses of expired medicine may still be available in Sana'a hospitals and healthcare centers, which could result in a major disaster with hundreds of fatalities. Where the Ministry of Health and Population in Sana'a is controlled by the Houthi rebels, there is unlikely a possibility to conduct a transparent and independent investigation and hold those responsible accountable for distributing expired drug to Sana'a hospitals and injecting doses into dozens of cancer-stricken children in Kuwait hospital. The investigation is especially critical given the allegations that Sana'a Ministry of Health and Population initially received the medicine from the World Health Organization and other donor organizations before it expired and was distributed to local hospitals. At the same time, the Yemeni medical and media agencies announced the death of 20 children. Approximately 30 other children who received the same dose suffered from complications and are still being treated in intensive care units at several hospitals in Sana'a. The Ministry of Health and Population announced that cancer patients died as a result of bacterial contamination in medicine packages that were smuggled to a private pharmacy in Sana'a, the capital.
Suicide cases have increased in the Houthi-controlled areas. 2 suicide cases were recorded in Hajjah and a third in Hudaydah in the past hours. One of the cases is an old man who committed suicide after he was beaten by a Houthi leader in Hajjah. In addition, the sources pointed out that a man committed suicide after his request for help was rejected by the Houthis. On the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, Yemenis continue to live in extreme poverty since the Houthis seized the capital, Sana'a. This report has more details.
Dignity for all in practice. This is the umbrella theme of the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty for 2022. The dignity of the human being is not only a fundamental right in itself, but constitutes the basis of all other fundamental rights. Therefore, dignity is not an abstract concept, it belongs to each and every one. Today, many people living in persistent poverty experience their dignity being denied and disrespected. 4 decades ago, Yemenis have bid farewell to the threat of poverty, hunger, and starvation that prevailed during the era of the priestly imamate until the moment of the war that the Houthi militia ignited against the Yemenis 8 years ago. From that moment until today, millions of Yemenis live among the danger of poverty, hunger, and lack of job opportunities, where the poverty rate in Yemen exceeded 65%, at a time when the world is celebrating the eradication of poverty and unemployment.
At a time when the world is striving to achieve the goals of sustainable development, including the eradication of poverty, poverty in Yemen is spreading day after day as a result of the ongoing war and the increased number of displaced people.
The scenes that were prevalent during the era of the priestly imamate have become a reality today, during the rule of the Iranian-backed Houthi militia. Poverty and hunger are growing and expanding among the citizens, while the Houthi militia continues to loot state resources, steal citizens' money and employee salaries, and impose royalties on them to enrich themselves.
The 26th September revolution had in the past eradicated some of the poverty sources in the country. But after what happened in 2014, Yemenis returned to what it was like before the revolution. Millions of children are suffering from acute malnutrition, people are getting killed and others commit suicide after suffering for many years from severe poverty and unemployment.
UN reports say that 8 years of war have made more than 25 million Yemenis live below the poverty line, and international warnings have increased the specter of post-poverty that threatens the lives of millions of citizens, yet the Houthi militia continues to ignore the inherent right of Yemenis to live in peace.
Coming next in the news. Years of war intensified fuel derivatives prices across Yemen. Rabies cases increase among children in Al-Dala. Such increase is attributed to the spread of stray dogs in the city. This report has more details.
The child Muhammad Haidara is waiting with his father in front of the pharmacy that belongs to a public hospital to get an expensive injection after Muhammad was bitten by a stray dog. The injection is not available in the hospital, and his father may have to spend his entire salary to buy the required injections to save him from the complications of rabies. The possibility of rabies infections has increased in the districts of Al-Dala, especially in the recent period.
The spread of rabid dogs in Al-Dala, especially in Qa'taba district, poses a danger in the society. Even the kids can't go to schools due to the fear of these dogs, which are spreading everywhere, in markets, streets and alleys. We're calling the local authorities to assume their responsibility and protect our children.
more than 97 cases were bitten by stray dogs and arrived at the emergency departments of hospitals in El Dorado during the month of September, in addition to other cases that arrived at private clinics. Medical sources confirmed that the bites of these dogs cause a viral infection that requires immediate treatment. Otherwise, it will lead to death.
The emergency departments in public hospitals receive a lot of cases who suffer from rabid dogs' bites. It is a dangerous disease which destroys brain cells and leads to more complications if it isn't treated properly. Public hospitals in Al-Dalia governorate suffer the lack of vaccines amid the increase of the infected cases.
The phenomenon of stray dogs has become a source of danger, which threatens young and old people in the districts of Al-Dalia. Appeals are increasing to the competent authorities, local councils, and the Ministry of Health to take the required measures, provide medicines, and save citizens from these rabid dogs and their dangerous diseases.
The UN announced that more than 2,900 schools in Yemen have been destroyed because of the war. The UN's Children's Fund stated that some schools in Yemen were used for non-educational purposes. The International Committee of the Red Cross added that more than 2 million children are out of school and that the educational sector in Yemen has collapsed. Houthi militias called for organizing sectarian courses. Local sources stated that the militia spread a direction to mosque preachers to urge citizens to enroll in these sectarian courses. According to reports, the courses range from half a month to 10 days in secret places, and those who fail to attend are deprived of some services, especially domestic gas. A Yemeni researcher specializing in antiquities relieved that an international auction will be held to sell more than 40 gold and bronze artifacts from the ancient history of Yemen. According to the researcher, the auction should be launched in London and will display more than 6,000 antiquities from around the world, including 110 Egyptian artifacts and more than 40 in gold bronze pieces of ancient Yemen. Years of conflict in Yemen created a huge fuel derivatives crisis. This has aggravated the suffering of citizens who lack the basic services including electricity, water, and even cooking gas. This report has more details.
The conflict in Yemen has intensified the crisis in the energy sector, led by the country's largest economic project, represented by the liquefied natural gas project. The Russian war in Ukraine and the accompanying economic crises contributed to drawing attention to the liquefied gas sector in Yemen and the suspension of the export process. Since the beginning of the war that has been going on in the country for more than 7 years, Yemen is facing international pressure to improve the public financial situation and to exploit the productive sectors that provide part of the country's needs of hard currency and constitute a suitable ground for a political solution and peace efforts, as well as the renewal and expansion of the UN-mediated truce. Informed sources confirmed that the efforts to re-export Yemeni liquefied gas are facing multiple obstacles and challenges, the most important of which is related to the old pricing of gas, which, if it was implemented, Yemen may benefit little from its revenues, as a result of the proposals offering that one of the coalition countries will take the lead of the task's supervision. In addition, the investing and exporting companies, on the pretext that they incurred heavy losses due to the suspension of exports and the failure of the project. Economic experts consider that the current moves to re-export liquefied gas are a fundamental issue that requires dealing with it responsibly and in a national manner, leading to the public interest and maximizing the benefits and gains of Yemen in the current difficult circumstances the country is going through. Economists believe that the prices of oil derivatives in Yemen will remain at high levels, indicating that the negative repercussions and effects of the Russian-Ukrainian war will be more profound on the prices of other goods, because they are closely related to fuel, which increases the suffering of vulnerable groups and rates of hunger and food insecurity.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. UN Deputy Chief calls for more actions to protect Yemenis. local and international groups demand investigating deaths of 20 child cancer patients in Sana'a. On World Poverty Day, Yemenis continue to suffer across the country. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.